My name is Justin Holland. I always considered myself an ordinary guy, at least for the first 26 years of my life. I am 5'11", 180 lobs, brown hair, green eyes, average looks and sexy equipment, and slightly above average muscle tone. Like everyone else, I have some strengths and some weaknesses. Perhaps my two best strengths are that I am significantly smarter than average and much nicer than average. I've always had a lot of friends because I treat everyone with respect and don't talk bad about other people either, to their face or behind their back. I'm kind and helpful to others 99.9% of the time. I rarely lose my temper, and when I do, it's only when I'm severely provoked. Two weaknesses that I have always known about are my lack of self-confidence and my condition. If I really lose my temper, I fly into a rage. Luckily, losing my temper has only happened 3 times in my life. Once I ended up in the hospital, and the other 2 times other people ended up in the hospital. I had another major weakness that I didn't know about until my wife, Ginger Holland, played the rating game. Ginger is also mostly average. Although for me, and I think for most guys, although I don't ask them, she is significantly prettier and sexier than average. Like me, she is usually pleasant to everyone, although not to the same extent as I am. I didn't have much sexual experience when Ginger and I got married at 21, although I certainly wasn't a virgin, and neither was she. We were married for 5 years when we were both 26. We were cute and enjoyed each other's company, and I was sure that each of us was happy with the other. Ginger then went to her friend Ashley's bachelorette party before her wedding, where she was to be a bridesmaid, hosted by another friend, Sybil. Ashley was a little more adventurous than Ginger or I. Sybil was more than adventurous. She was brave, stubborn, and sometimes reckless. She was the only one we knew closely who owned a home with her husband, Trent. Since no one at the party was rich, it wasn't a huge event like a Vegas weekend, but it was an all-day event starting at 10 a.m. on Saturday at Sybil's house. Trent was kicked out during the party. Trent, I, and the other 2 husbands of the party played tennis and bowling during the day, and watched the action movie Chick Killer in the early evening. Trent then went to one of the other husbands' apartments around 10 p.m. to wait for a call from Sybil to say it was okay to come back, and I went home to our apartment. I was almost asleep on the couch with the TV just providing background noise when the phone rang at about 11:30. It was Sybil. In a slurred voice, she said, "Hey, Justin, man, your little lady passed out. Come get her." Then she just hung up. I quickly splashed some water on my face, grabbed my car keys, and drove to get Ginger. Ginger rarely gets drunk. In fact, I had only seen her like that twice before that night. Sure enough, she passed out, so I carried her and her bag to the car, put my seatbelt on, and drove home. By the time we got to our apartment, she had recovered a little, so luckily I didn't have to carry her up the steep stairs to our second-floor apartment, although I did have to help her do it. She was in a cheerful, playful mood, just like the 2 times I saw her drunk. I had to help her undress, I took a shower with her, and then put her to bed. As expected, Ginger was hungover the next morning. I talked to her a little while she was still in bed, but I didn't hear much from her about the party other than moaning. About the only sensible thing she said out loud was, "Justin, honey, please get me the pills I have in my purse and some water." I looked for her purse, but remembered it was in the car along with her party bag. I brought both into the apartment and rummaged through her purse, removing items, including her cell phone, until I found a bottle of pills. I took 2 pills from the bottle, poured a glass of cold water, and returned to the bedroom. "Oh, thank you, dear," she blurted out, reaching for the pills and glass. After she swallowed the pills, I took the glass from her and asked, "Will they force you to return to the land of the living?" "I really hope so," she muttered. "They're supposed to quickly ease a hangover. But I need to sleep a little more." "Is there anything else I can help with?" I asked. "Oh, could you be nice and gently pat my head for a while I fall asleep?" she asked, reaching out to me and stroking my cheek. "Your desire is my law," I grinned. I gently stroked her head for about 10 minutes until she fell asleep. Then I got up and went to the kitchen. While I was reading the morning paper at the kitchen table, Ginger's cell phone rang. The sounds her phone made were different from mine, so I didn't know if it was a text message or a phone call. I took her cell phone, and when I did, I must have accidentally turned on the screen because a message came from Sybil. Although Sybil used strange text jargon and abbreviations, I was quite sure that the text said, "Important. Don't forget your game sheet is in your bag." I hung up and continued reading the newspaper. Then I began to wonder why Sybil felt compelled to send this message. My curiosity got the better of me, so I picked up the bag and looked through its contents. There were the usual things I would expect to see when going to a bachelorette party. And underneath, folded in half, were 2 sheets of paper with typed and handwritten text on both sides of each sheet. I felt like I was invading Ginger's privacy by reading them, but I thought, what harm can it do? If I had not read these papers, I might have remained ignorant, stupid, and happy. The first side of the first sheet was titled Rating Game. All the papers seemed to have questions and a few statements printed on them, with Ginger's distinctive handwriting underneath each question. Next to almost all the answers were what looked like grades in someone else's handwriting, and several letter grades, ACA, B+, at the top of the first page. Ginger's name was not on it, but there was no doubt that she had filled it out. Despite my concerns about violating Ginger's privacy, my curiosity was at its peak, and I couldn't suppress it. A large number of the first questions I read were about characteristics and happiness with me. Now my curiosity was off the charts. I read with a smile on my face for most questions, such as, is he affectionate? Does he always remember important dates? What are his best character traits? Do you love him as much as when you got married? Her response to this was more, and so on. And Ginger's responses. Most of her responses were flattering to me, interspersed with her good sense of humor and some jokes we shared. I wish I had stopped before I got to the top of the second sheet, page 3, because the questions and answers there, now imprinted in my brain, were different. Question: what is your husband's best intimate talent? Answer: snuggles like a big teddy bear. What are his biggest intimate flaws? Unfortunately, everything else. How would you rate your husband in bed before you got married? On a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, 2, maybe 3. That's not why I married him. How do you rate his skills in bed after marriage? Unfortunately, the same thing. 2+, I think. What has been your best sexual experience since you got married? One night stand during a business trip to Chicago. I've never been to Chicago. What happened next still remains a blur to me. I think I collapsed in a chair, shed a few tears, and then went outside. I'm not entirely sure of this sequence, but I remember almost falling down the stairs and bruising my knee on the railing when I tripped. I also think that after wandering the streets on foot for several hours, at least I was smart enough not to drive because I would have gotten into an accident. My mind was in turmoil. Until I read the questions and answers at the top of page 3 of the rating game, I thought that I had sexually satisfied Ginger and that we were sexually compatible and definitely exclusive. Not having an overabundance of self-confidence to begin with, my self-image quickly evaporated. In fact, it was in a terrible state. I finally reached my apartment around 4 p.m. I didn't know what I would say to Ginger. I didn't know what to do. I felt more lost than I ever had in my life. When I entered the apartment, Ginger was in the kitchen. Sybil was with her. I saw Ginger crying, and they both had scared faces. "Oh, honey, where have you been? I was so worried," Ginger cried, running up to me and hugging me around the neck. I didn't have any reaction at all. I looked like a statue, my arms at my sides, a constant blank expression on my face. I noticed that there was no sign of the rating game on the kitchen table. I guess I'll go," Sybil muttered, and then flew out with a look of relief on her face. Ginger finally pulled away from me with tears in her eyes. Essentially, I was still in a trance. I remember wondering if she would bring up the subject of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or let me. "What would you like me to cook for dinner?" Ginger asked, trying to appear cheerful and cheerful. "Anything you want." If we don't have it, I'll go and buy it. With a blank expression still on my face, I muttered, Italian sausage with peppers and onions, and then plopped down in a chair. The fact that I actually answered the question seemed to cheer her up. Oh, great, honey. I'll go get them right now, and I'll also buy 6 cans of your favorite imported beer, she blurted out. She wiped her face, grabbed the car keys, kissed me on the cheek, and ran out the door. I'll be right back, she shouted. I asked for Italian sausage because I knew we didn't have it in our house, and it was a safe choice. As soon as the door closed, I began to pack my things. I made a decision. I just couldn't live a lie. I needed enough clothes to last me a few nights until I could find another place to live. I could sleep on the couch in my office at work once, and then find a place where I could stay for a while. I expected that by the time Ginger returned, I would be gone. She was faster than I thought. When she saw that I was closing one suitcase and the other was already closed and standing near the door, she shouted, "What are you doing, Justin? Why are you packing?" "I think you can understand that," I answered blankly. Her jaw dropped when she heard this, and I guess she felt she had to bring up the 800-pound gorilla. "It was just a stupid game, dear. I was drunk. You saw what a terrible state I was in." "I didn't really mean my answers," she exclaimed. Still emotionless, I looked into her eyes and answered, "Oh, you didn't mean what you said about loving me. You certainly couldn't mean the answers about how I'm 2 out of 10 in bed, and that you had a one-night stand that actually made you happy, because no sane person would lie about such things." "It was just a damn game," she screamed. "I don't give a fuck about any of this. I love you. I want you to be the father of my children," she ranted as I picked up my suitcases and headed for the door. "You can't leave because of some game at the bachelorette party," she howled, grabbing me and literally falling to the floor. Her scream as she lay face down in the doorway caused the other residents on our floor to open their doors and widen their eyes. Having taken 2 steps down the stairs, I turned around and said calmly, "You deserve to have a husband who satisfies you. You don't need me." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of our neighbors rush to the lying figure on the threshold of my former apartment, her crying creating background sounds as I mechanically got into the car and drove away. That Sunday night, I stayed in my office and showered in the gym in the basement of the office building I worked in, then changed clothes. Throughout the day, I sent all incoming phone calls to voicemail. I called a few of my single friends and found one who agreed to let me stay in his spare bedroom until I found another place. Trent, Cybel's husband, visited me that afternoon. "Can we talk in private, Justin?" he asked with a shy expression on his face. "Oh, shit," I said to myself. "Now all the husbands of the women at the bachelorette party know that I am sexually inappropriate. I will have to leave town." Despite the pit in my stomach, I didn't see a way to avoid this, and I thought that maybe by talking to Trent, I could avoid future visits from other people. So I said, "Okay." We walked into my office and Trent closed the door. "Look, Justin, I don't really know any details, but Sybil is beside herself because she made the women at the party play some stupid game she made up. She says that all the women were drunk when they played it and that no one knew whose game sheet they were looking at and judging and, that everyone was just being stupid. Sybil is devastated that you left Ginger and that you apparently aren't answering your calls. I knew how much it hurt Trent and that he was only there out of love for Sybil, so I didn't say anything or even look him in the eyes." Trent took a deep breath and then continued. "Sybil is at your house right now and says that Ginger is a wreck and couldn't go to work today, so Sybil didn't go to be with her either. Dude, can you get through this? I know whatever Ginger said was just a drink." After gathering all my composure and doing everything possible not to cry, I finally looked at Trent. He shifted in his chair and it seemed as if he would rather be anywhere else on earth. "Sorry, dude," I said quietly. My insides were ripped out. I don't see any way to overcome this. Then I laid my head on the table and, despite my decision not to do so, began to bawl like a baby. I felt Trent touch my head and heard him say, "Sorry, man," and then heard the door to my office open and close. I was on autopilot for the next week. I contacted family law attorney Jessica Stearns. who was recommended by the corporate attorney at the company I worked for. I told her that I wanted to leave as quickly as possible and that I would most likely give in financially. "How does your salary compare to hers?" asked Jessica. "Approximately equal," I answered. "I probably earn a couple thousand more a year, but I'll change jobs as soon as the divorce is final. I need to leave." Jessica looked sympathetic. "There should be no grounds for alimony. How about a consultation? Are you open to that?" "No. I just can't stand it," I muttered in response. "One of the judges, Judge Costner, in family law court almost always gives this order. If we get to him, we may have no choice," she said. "Do the best you can," I replied. I wrote out a check for her fee and shuffled out the door. My single friend talked me into staying with him. He needed a roommate to help with rent, otherwise he might have to move. He had a job where he traveled a lot and was pretty easy to get along with, so I agreed. I had to start answering calls at work because clients didn't like their calls always going to voicemail during normal business hours. Ginger called often, especially after she was served with the divorce papers. It was difficult to talk to her. Usually after a couple of minutes of her crying and apologizing, I would tell her that I was in too much pain and that she would be better off without me, and then I would hang up. Murphy's Law said we would get Judge Costner, and of course, Murphy's Law always prevails. Ginger really wanted him to schedule a consultation, and there was nothing Jessica could do to stop it. My first counseling session was one of the most painful experiences of my life. Ginger went through a whole range of emotions, sometimes asking for forgiveness, crying, screaming, chastising me for failing to be a man, repeating over and over again that she loved me, that if I looked at the whole game sheet, I would see that I was a Category B+ husband. Of course, she destroyed the game sheet the day I saw it, so the consultant couldn't look at it. Ginger also swore that her one-night stand in Chicago was the only time she had sex with another man during our marriage, that she was drunk and felt terrible then too, and that it would never happen again. These comments acted like anesthesia on me. I participated as little as possible in the session. Luckily, I was numb most of the time, because if I wasn't, I probably would have cried. I saw the consultant's sympathetic glances. The counselor ended the session 10 minutes early and asked me to stay and talk to her alone. As soon as Ginger left the room, she got down to business. "Justin, I think you are clinically depressed. I feel like you had no self-confidence before, and this episode just destroyed you. I don't see how marriage counseling will do you any good, but I do want you to see a psychiatrist. Will you report this to the judge?" I asked. "It will be in my report to him. Here is a list of psychiatrists I recommend," she continued, opening her desk drawer, pulling out a printed sheet and handing it to me. "Please go to someone. You need help. You can't go through this alone." The following week, Judge Costner revoked the counseling order, despite Ginger's protests. However, he told her that she should see the counselor again, alone. I'm sure she did, because a week later she stopped resisting the divorce. Obviously, I didn't attend Ashley's wedding, and I think Ginger declined to be a bridesmaid. Ginger couldn't believe that I didn't want anything from our apartment or our savings other than a few items of clothing and sports equipment. She offered photos, souvenirs, all sorts of things, and even money from our checking account or some bonds we owned together. But either Jessica or I politely declined everything. I know what really bothered her was that I didn't want any of our wedding albums. Ginger never asked for child support. Before my divorce was final, I quit my job and moved out of town. I got another stressful job that required 80 hours a week but paid very well. Since I had no other life at that point, all I did was work, eat, sleep, and exercise, I made a ton of money over the next 2 years. In those 2 years, I never went on a date, and I never even masturbated. I don't know how long I would have kept this up. But one day on vacation, when work wasn't doing me any good, and I'd already been working out for 3 hours, I decided to clean out my apartment. I dropped the folder, and out came the list of psychiatrists the marriage counselor had given me. I never thought about it. Holding the paper in his hands, he sat down at the kitchen table and began to cry. In a moment of courage, I decided right then and there to do something with my life. The next day, I called Dr. Winston. We arranged a consultation for the next day after that. I took one of the few days off from work in the last 2 years and went to see him. After listening to my story and my post-divorce life, including my complete lack of sex of any kind, he unhesitatingly prescribed a further course of action. "There's no way I can help you, Mr. Holland. You need to see a sex therapist. My strong recommendation is Dr. Susan Jenkins. She's both a psychologist and a licensed sex therapist, and if anyone can help you, she can. I'll call her right now. When can you see her?" asked Dr. Winston. "As soon as she gets the chance, I have the courage to do it, and I don't want to delay and look for a reason to back down," I replied. By Friday of that week, I went to see Susan because Dr. Jenkins insisted that I call her. She was a distinguished woman with deep, piercing blue eyes, light brown hair, a graceful figure, and fashionable clothes. She wore granny glasses, which gave her a stylish rather than aged look. I would estimate her age to be 50. She had a written report from Dr. Winston and began talk therapy immediately. Despite my concerns when I walked in, she put me at ease within the first 10 minutes. She told me that the specifics of my situation were unique, which did not surprise me. Despite the uniqueness of my situation, by the end of my second session, she had a complete plan of action. "I know this will work, Justin," she said with a big smile. She got up from the chair, walked over to the sofa where I was sitting, grabbed my hands, pulled me towards her, and hugged me. When she opened her arms, she looked me in the eyes and said, "I guarantee that within 6 months, all your problems will be behind you. The next session will last 2 hours and will include time with Nadine." "Who is this?" I asked. "Practical sex therapist. I'm a conversational therapist. I need to have an arm's-length relationship with you. Nadine needs to touch you intimately. Working together, we can solve your problem," Susan said with a smile. Sorry for being rude or impudent," I muttered. "But Nadine is a call girl?" "No. There is no similarity between the two concepts. Among the many differences, hands-on care focuses on medical decisions rather than sex for pleasure, and is limited to a predetermined number of sessions. Call girls have no licensing requirements and are illegal in most places, whereas sex therapists are licensed and legal," Susan replied with a smile. Sorry for asking a stupid question," I answered. "It wasn't a stupid question. Many others have the same question. I'm glad you asked this question. Perhaps to preempt another question you may have, you will need to be tested for STDs at our next session, and we will provide you with Nadine's health certificate," Susan continued. She reached over to her desk and pulled out a printed sheet with the names of 3 testing labs, one of which was located just 3 blocks from my office. "Any lab of these 3 will do the job. Just hand them this sheet that has my information on it. They are used to dealing with me, and they will email me the results." "Thank you," I said. "I must tell you that the treatment, although expensive and health insurance does not pay for it, is something that I highly recommend." "Money is not a problem for me at the moment," I grinned. "I just want to get better." Susan hugged me again and whispered, "You will succeed, Justin. I assure you." The next day, I took tests. I tried to put my next session out of my mind, but whenever I wasn't working, I thought about it. I tried to calm down as much as I could when I showed up at Susan's office a week after the tests. "I'm so glad to see you, Justin," Susan greeted me. "There's no problem with your STD test results, so let me introduce you to Nadine, and then we'll discuss procedures." I remained standing as Susan pressed a button on her desk, and a pleasant-looking but not very beautiful woman, probably in her early 30s, came in from the next room. She seemed to be wearing only a robe and slippers. "Justin, this is Nadine." "Nadine?" "Justin," said Susan. Nadine had a warm smile and a gentle but almost electric touch as she took one of my hands in hers. "It's very nice to meet you, Justin," she said, and from her behavior I was sure that she was serious. Even though I had seen many women look more beautiful than Nadine, she had an aura about her that made her certainly more attractive than her appearance would suggest. As Susan spoke, I found myself looking at Nadine more, either directly or out of the corner of my eye, than listening. I wished I had understood everything Susan said when I heard. "So, Nadine, why don't you take Justin to your room now and come back in about an hour?" Nadine took my hand and led me into the next room. There was a bed, pillows on the carpet, low lighting, and soft music. Erotic images flashed on a large screen on the wall, changing every few seconds. "Please take off your shoes and socks, Justin," she said with a smile. As soon as I did, we sat cross-legged on the cushions on the carpet, facing each other, both of my hands in hers. We talked for a while just about things in general. She smiled or laughed most of the time we talked. It was easy to feel at ease with her. She moved so smoothly into starting therapy that I wasn't nervous. That is, until I noticed she was completely naked. "Justin, the first thing we're going to do is look at my sensitive sexual components. In fact, it's just a biology lesson, only with a living subject. Let's both stand up and I'll guide your hands." When we stood up, I got a good look at her body. She was what most men would consider to be slightly overweight. She was about 4 inches shorter than me. Talking to me softly, without any judgment or any real instructions, she moved my right hand, then my left hand, to touch more of each of her breasts. The tactile sensation was amazing. "Now pinch me lightly," she instructed. "It makes me feel really good, Justin." About a minute later, a look of pleasure appeared on her face. In fact, Nadine gave me a demonstration lesson as a biologist and female anatomist. I remained dressed, and she conducted a personal journey through all the important places of her body. From time to time, she assessed my physiological reaction to her actions and was always pleased with it. "Could you confirm that it was that good, Justin? Could you say it?" "Of course," I muttered. "Would you like to be the one to make me feel so good, Justin?" she asked with a serious face. Yes, I would really like to," I finally blurted out. "Then we'll discuss this at the next session?" She grinned. "Now I'll get dressed and take you to Susan again." Nadine slowly put on her robe, her only piece of clothing, while I watched her carefully, completely fascinated. She led me by the hand back to Susan's office. I couldn't believe it when I looked at my watch. A whole hour had passed, although it seemed like only a few minutes had passed. "Have you made any progress?" Susan asked Nadine. "Yes, and very significant," Nadine answered. "I think we should give Justin some written information to think about, and we'll continue next week." "Sounds tempting," Susan replied. "See you next week," Nadine said with a smile, squeezing my hands. Then she left the room. "Do you share Nadine's opinion about significant progress?" Susan asked me. "I can say that she has me very excited, and it is impossible to believe that I will not make progress with her," I replied with a smile. Susan and I discussed some more general things. She then handed me a booklet, co-written by Nadine, that told me what to expect in the future, including the number of sessions, how to look at sex, and analysis of different sexual techniques and scenarios. I thanked her, and when I finished my 2-hour session, I realized that it had had a surprisingly draining effect on me. I had a lot to think about before our meeting next week. I had a hard time getting Nadine out of my head. Her approach was so sensual and erotic, but at the same time pragmatic. One thing was for sure. I was looking forward to meeting next week. The following week, Nadine immediately took off her clothes when we entered her room. We reviewed the first week, then she instructed me in the rest of the techniques for the next stage. Nadine told me everything, as well as her natural reaction to what I was doing, which was impossible to hide. And she made it very enjoyable for me. She made sure I knew that every woman is different. She instructed me on what techniques were most likely to make sex enjoyable for my partner and what things to avoid. Once again, my time with Nadine flew by. And after another chat with Susan immediately after the practice session with Nadine, I was exhausted again. The third session with Nadine provided the breakthrough I was looking for. Immediately after she undressed, she said, "Justin, I need to undress you now. While I do this, you should touch me gently where you feel comfortable." I immediately placed both my hands on her breasts, and she smiled. As she spoke soothing words, Nadine soon had me completely naked. "We can move on to the next step," Nadine said, stroking me gently. "Let's go to bed." "No need to be nervous, Justin. I'll make sure you do everything right," Nadine said with a big smile. I did exactly as she asked. Her pleasant tone and alluring body made it easy for me. I really thought I would be apprehensive, but everything that happened overcame my fears. I thought about Ginger from time to time, which was unpleasant, but I quickly came to my senses when I realized that this woman was much more grateful and enthusiastic than Ginger had ever been. Hugs are very important for women. Almost all women really like it, especially after a very successful experience like ours. When she made her last comment, a huge smile appeared on my face, and I felt a rush of hormones. Wow! I aroused the sex therapist, I boasted to myself. When we returned to Susan's office, I saw that our session had lasted 80 minutes. This time, Nadine sat with me on Susan's sofa and took my hand. Nadine described the session to Susan, and both were genuinely pleased. Susan asked both of us a lot of questions and then suggested 2 more sessions between Nadine and I instead of the 3 that had been previously planned. I was disappointed because I knew Nadine would never allow me to have sex with her except as part of my therapy, but I accepted it. The next 2 sessions with Nadine were amazing. My confidence grew by leaps and bounds for a total of about 3 hours in her loving arms. She did what a wife should do. She was probably more successful in achieving her goals than any other person I've ever worked with in my entire life. Susan declared me almost cured. "I feel great, Susan. How do you rate my success? You're euphoric right now, but in the next few weeks you will miss Nadine and doubt your confidence in relationships with other women. You need to establish a relationship as soon as possible, with an experienced partner who will do his best to satisfy you and teach you other things, and things that Nadine could not teach you for ethical reasons. Then you will have your last obstacle," said Susan stoically. "The last obstacle?" I asked. "We'll make an appointment in 4 months, and then I'll talk to you about it. At the same time, do you have any prospects for the type of partner I'm talking about?" she asked. "I really do not know. There are a few women at work and at the health club who have shown interest in me at one time or another, but they are younger, and I haven't responded to them at all before, so they've probably written me off as gay. I haven't had any meaningful social life in the last 2 years. I may not be able to do what you say," I replied despondently. Susan thought for a moment. "Justin, I might get in trouble if this gets out and people misinterpret what I'm doing, but I have an offer for you. However, this will require some outlay of money on your part. Do you want to hear this, or are you not interested?" I thought for a second. Susan has been a consummate professional so far and has done a fantastic job for me. I wouldn't discount it. "Is she a call girl?" "No, my friend is in a bad situation." "I'm paying attention," I said. "Her name is Brittany. She is 48 years old. She just came out of bankruptcy and divorcee. I'm not at liberty to go into all the details, but she needs somewhere to live. She will have to leave the city to live with her elderly parents if she doesn't find a good job soon. The only job she can get is as a servant due to her ex-husband and ex-boss ruining her reputation. Isn't she too old for me?" "I don't turn 29 until next week," I asked, somewhat confused. "I'll tell you what," said Susan. "Here's her number. I'll call it right now while you're here to make sure her service isn't cut off. Can you meet her for dinner tomorrow? If you don't become interested after meeting her, then just leave. I won't be offended. If you like her, be open about what kind of deal you have in mind. Required instruction with accommodation, meals, and entertainment." I asked myself, what do I have to lose? And came to the conclusion that I had nothing, so I said, "Okay." The next evening, I met Brittany for dinner at a restaurant. She was easy to spot. She had fiery red hair, big breasts, a big ass, and a thin waist. Her face was not classically beautiful, but it was very pleasant, open and friendly. I couldn't believe how quickly we hit it off. I immediately felt a connection. After dinner, we walked around the park and sat on a bench to talk. "I don't know how much Susan told you about why I wanted to meet you," I said. Nothing much except that you were her patient and that we could help each other, although I'm not sure what she meant by that, Brittany replied. I'm not going to work as a call girl, no matter how desperate my situation is. I have a proposal for you, I answered, trying to sound as professional as possible. Why don't you come live in my apartment? I have a 2-bedroom apartment in a good part of the city. If you cook and wash for me, I will support you. If we develop a close relationship and I can benefit from your experience, then I will support you in learning the job or whatever you want to do. I will sign a contract with you that states that, in exchange for cooking for me, I cannot evict you without 6 weeks' notice. Brittany sat there without saying anything for a good 2 minutes. When she finally spoke, she simply said, "Okay," with a big smile on her face. We shook hands. I helped her move what little she had into my apartment that Saturday after we signed a simple agreement, and we were both smiling. The platonic relationship lasted only 2 days. I really enjoyed her company on Saturday and Sunday, and it was clear that she enjoyed mine too. On Monday, when I came home from work, she was just getting out of the shower, apparently after her daily workout, which explained her toned thighs, a feature that was impossible to miss. She was wearing only a towel. "I didn't know you'd be home so early," she said, eyes wide. "I left early to see if I could buy you dinner, but," I said, staring at her as the towel barely covered her crotch. "But what?" she asked with a grin. I became more courageous than I had ever been in my life. "I would love to eat here with you," I said, licking my lips. Brittany dropped her towel. Thus began the most sexually intense time of my life. She taught me everything about what a woman wants and how a woman should work to please me. I cut back on my work hours significantly because I really wanted to spend time with Brittany. My job was such that I wasn't hurting anyone by working less. I was just making a little less money. But I had plenty of it after 2 years of just working. Over the next 4 months, I honestly don't think a day went by without Brittany and I having sex at least once. I paid for her professional training, gave her money and fashionable clothes, and she cooked when we weren't going out and kept the apartment immaculate. When I had my next meeting with Susan, she asked me with a sly grin, "So, how are things going with Brittany?" "Very, very, very fantastic," I replied with a wide grin. "We're not in love with each other, but we definitely have mutually satisfying sex." Susan smiled. "Yesterday I talked to Brittany on the phone. I asked her to honestly rate you as a sexual partner on a scale of 1 to 10. Do you want to hear her answer?" I wasn't sure, but it was the moment of truth. "Yes, I want to," I finally answered. 9 most of the time, sometimes 10, and never less than 8. It seems that if 2+ was ever true, and I'm not sure it was, those days are long gone, said Susan, beaming. I felt so good that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, I decided to do neither and ask a few questions. "So, where should I go now?" "What are your plans with Brittany?" asked Susan. "She finishes her vocational training in a month and hopes to have her own place and job within a month or so after that. While we both really enjoy the sex, I would rate her a 10 without hesitation. And each other's company, we both understand that our relationship is not long-term." I meant, do I need any more sessions? "No, but there is one last thing if you want to achieve complete, unconditional success," Susan replied. Then she stared into space for a few seconds, rocked back and forth in her chair a couple of times, sighed, and looked me straight in the eyes. "For the last part of your therapy, to make sure you are completely healed, you must have sex with Ginger again. Can you handle this?" asked Susan. That was the last thing I expected to hear from her. "For what?" I whined as soon as I regained my composure. "To exorcise your last demons. I'm not suggesting that you marry her again or have a long-term relationship with her. All I'm suggesting, roughly speaking, is to prove to her what you are capable of and see for yourself how her reaction has changed. You have to see it for yourself, otherwise there will always be doubts in your mind." Was the only answer I could come up with. "Think about it. However, we are done with you, and it was a pleasure to have you as a patient. I can say that I am delighted with the results and wish you all the best for the future," Susan said with a big smile as she stood up. "Thank you, Susan. You were great. You and Nadine couldn't have been better." I replied, holding out my hand to shake. To hell with handshakes, she laughed, walking up to me and hugging me tightly. I hugged her back. I had a lot to think about. Since I respected Brittany as a woman with experience, and it was something I certainly couldn't ask my mother about, I asked her opinion about Susan's latest assignment. Susan's previous assignment brought me together with you, which probably couldn't have worked out better, I said. But do you think it's really possible to complete the last task? Of course, Brittany answered nonchalantly. There's no reason why she wouldn't want to see if you've changed. You don't think she hates me now, do you? I can't answer that question for you, but the point is that Susan has never made a mistake before, so why not try? Well, she lives 500 miles from here, and I wouldn't know how to break the ice. Take heart, Brittany laughed. I'll stop bothering you in 2 months. You rent your apartment month to month, and you've told me several times that you'd like to move back to your hometown. As for contacting her, my God, you were married to this woman for 5 years. You should know how to do it. If you have problems, call one of her friends, like Sybil, who threw the party that destroyed your self-confidence. I shrugged and said, I guess I'll do that. Within 2 months, I had a version of my current job in my hometown. I spoke to Sybil and Ashley, after they were sworn to secrecy about my contact with them, and learned that Ginger had not dated much, and was having a hard time moving on, and would most likely welcome contact with me. Brittany received high recommendations from her job training instructors and found her ideal job. I paid 2 months' rent in advance, so Brittany would have a place to stay until she found suitable housing. I left my furniture with her, as moving it would be more trouble than it was worth, and she would need it. Brittany had a long list of guys interested in her, so she would have no problem finding someone once I left. A few days before I moved, Brittany and I went for a long weekend together at a resort in the mountains. We didn't do much fishing, hiking, or sightseeing, but we did break the bed in the room we were staying in. We both had tears in our eyes as we parted and wished each other luck. Less than a week after I moved in, through Sybil, who still felt guilty about her part in our divorce, I arranged an unintentional meeting between Ginger and myself at a local shopping center. Sybil called me on my cell phone to tell me what store she and Ginger were going to. I was just casually looking at some clothes at the front of this store when Sybil and Ginger walked in. Justin? Sybil exclaimed, then said to Ginger, Damn it, Ginger, it's Justin! And grabbed Ginger's hand and hurried over to me. I feigned surprise, but greeted them warmly. Ginger looked like she had seen a ghost. I looked Ginger up and down. She looked really good. Although she had added a few wrinkles to her face and she may have lost 5 pounds that she really couldn't afford to lose. But she looked really good. Hi, Ginger. Hi, Sybil. Nice to see you, I said cheerfully. When did you arrive in the city? Asked Sybil. Are you just visiting? I just moved here this week. I'm back in the city. Hopefully forever, I answered, trying to fake a smile. So why didn't you call us? Asked Sybil, a little irritated. I was working up the courage to do it. I especially wanted to call you, Ginger, but I was afraid of what your reaction might be. Well, I didn't know if you'd ever want to see me again, I said shyly. Well, of course she wants to, right, Ginger? Sybil said with a wide grin. Ginger just stood there, looking like she wanted to say something, but the words just wouldn't come out of her mouth. There were tears in her eyes as she muttered, Sybil put her out of her misery. Justin, why don't you take Ginger to one of the restaurants in the mall? We were both going to eat soon anyway. Call me whenever you want me to pick up Ginger later. I'll take her home myself, I said quickly. That is if you let me take you to lunch, Ginger. Okay, she answered weakly and stopped the tears that had already begun to come. Let's talk about inconvenience. The first 50 minutes that Ginger and I spent together in the restaurant were the most awkward of my life. Neither of us wanted to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, so we just asked general questions about how we were, what we were doing now, and the like, along with a series of painful pauses. Just as I was about to ask for the check, Ginger blurted out, I missed you, Justin. I hope we can be friends. I'm not interested in being friends with you, Ginger, I said flatly. Her face fell before I continued. However, I am interested in dating you. A slight smile appeared on Ginger's lips, and she said, I don't know. You hurt me a lot by divorcing me. I know I turned red with anger. Damn. I thought you were the one who cheated on me and insulted me in front of your friends. I guess I remembered that wrong, right? With that, I stood up, threw 2 20s on the table and walked away, angry at myself for ruining everything, but even more angry at Ginger for making such an idiotic comment. By the time I left the restaurant, she caught up with me. She pushed me against the wall, and before I could stop her, she put her arms around my neck and started kissing me. In between kisses, she moaned, I'm sorry I drove you away. I have to admit that the kisses were nice. Ginger was always a fantastic kisser. Finally, she let me get some air and said, Yes, I would like to go on a date with you. When? I wanted so badly to say, Fuck you, bitch. But that wouldn't help me, so I replied, How about Saturday night? I'll pick you up at 7 Nos Stiors for dinner and dancing. Wonderful, she smiled. I can show you where I live when you take me home. She squeezed my hand as I drove to her apartment building, a different one from the one we lived in together. She invited me in to show me her apartment, but I refused. When I picked up Ginger on Saturday, it was obvious that she was trying her best to look killer. She was puzzled when I didn't go into her apartment and just waited outside while she put the finishing touches on it, but she didn't say anything about it. When she did appear, I didn't recognize anything about the clothes she was wearing, but they perfectly emphasized her exquisite body. She wore just the right amount of makeup, including eyeshadow that brought out her captivating blue eyes. It was almost like a first date for both of us, but with someone we had known for a long time. We had a great time over dinner and dancing, including a few slow dances. When I brought her home, she invited me in. Here's my chance to prove, and then leave her. I still don't know exactly why I didn't do it, but I refused to go into her apartment. There was a look of real disappointment on her face, but she instantly brightened up when I asked her to come with me to the play on Tuesday night. She quickly agreed. We met 3 or 4 nights a week for the next 3 weeks. While we were kissing, I never went further with her than rubbing her tits through her clothes, and knew how to deftly move her hand away from my zipper on each of the many occasions she tried to seduce me. I also never entered her apartment. Sure, I was playing mind games with Ginger, but even though I was having sex with 2 other women in the neighborhood during that time, I was really starting to torture myself as much as Ginger. During this time, we never discussed the circumstances of our divorce. Things came to a head when we were returning from a baseball game one Sunday afternoon. Ginger asked if we could go to the park, where she and I often went when we were married. As we sat on our favorite bench, isolated from most of the activities in the park, Ginger laid it all out. Why don't you want to come to my apartment, Justin? Because, Ginger, there may be things in there that remind me of our marriage, things that I want to forget. You would be surprised to find that nothing of our old life is there. All the furniture has been replaced, and the photographs have been hidden. Oh, I replied, genuinely surprised. Why didn't you invite me to your house, Justin? Because it would definitely lead to sex, and I don't want to disappoint you, I replied casually. An expression of despair and pain appeared on Ginger's face, and tears welled up in her eyes. Justin, I know you don't want to talk about what happened to us, but I'm going to, and if you try to leave, I'll hold you and make a scene. Love has always been more important to me than sex, and I loved you and only you. And I'm so sorry that I hurt you. I can't tell you how much I suffered over this. I want you to give me another chance, and I think you are ready to do so since you have met me more than a dozen times since your return. Maybe I've changed so much that you don't want me. Maybe now I'm more interested in sex than love, I replied in a harsh tone. I want to find out, she exclaimed. Then let's go to your apartment, I said, causing Ginger to smile broadly. I replayed this scenario in my mind many times. I visualized it in the same way that a navigator visualizes key routes, or a forward visualizes how he will hit the opponent's goal. This included what I did to Brittany to make her comatose, plus the rest. As soon as we entered Ginger's apartment, I pressed my lips to hers and roughly removed her clothes. Still pressing my lips to hers, I lifted her by her buttocks and essentially threw her onto the sofa. Mission complete. I didn't make love to Ginger. I had sex with her until she was unconscious. I was confident that this was the best physical sex she had ever had in her life. So I completed Susan's last task and could move on. However, now the question was whether I wanted it. After I had been in my apartment for about 2 hours, Ginger called. "Hey, Justin, I wanted to thank you for turning my world upside down. I have never felt anything like this in my life. Is it good or bad?" I was unfazed. So far beyond good that it's not in the same universe. Although I wish you could stay and cuddle with me. "It was just sex, Ginger. I liked it too," I replied. "Oh," she replied, and then there was a long pause. "Would you like to come to dinner on Tuesday night?" "What? For dessert?" I asked. "Anything you want?" "And I really mean anything, Justin," she replied. "Okay, what time should I be there? Is 6 in the evening normal?" "Of course. See you then," I replied. My arrival at Ginger's apartment on Tuesday set the tone. Long story short, we continued our passionate sexual relationship for the next 6 weeks. Ginger never made any overt comparisons between our sex life when we were married and now, probably because she didn't want to reopen old wounds, but she told me repeatedly how happy and fulfilled she was. A strange thing happened while I was having fun with Ginger. I fell in love with her again. While I had almost completely resolved the issue that divided us, in the back of my mind, I had concerns about whether Ginger truly understood how much she had hurt me. My reaction to this worry probably wasn't very mature, but I felt like I had to make sure she felt my pain before we could move forward. My opportunity to see that she felt the same as I did came on Sunday morning. I was about to head back to my apartment after breakfast when she said she needed to talk to me about something. "Justin, the last thing I want to do is put pressure on you, especially since the last 2 months I've been the happiest I've ever been. But I was offered a promotion in another city. I need to know if we have a future together, because if we do, I will categorically refuse. But if we don't have a future, I owe it to myself to leave." She was clearly nervous and biting her lip. "So, okay, what can you tell me?" Without hesitation, I answered, "Well, Ginger, part of me still loves you. However, sex is very important to me, and you are simply not good enough in bed for us to have a future together. When I compare you to the women I've been with since we got divorced, you just don't measure up. Sorry. So maybe you should take this promotion." She was beside herself with shock. Her eyes were wide open and tears were flowing from them. I stood up, kissed her forehead, then said, "Maybe we can get together again, before you move." Then I turned and walked out the door, making sure it was closed when I left. Through the door, I heard her sobs and lamentations. I waited a good 2 minutes, then came back. I lifted her limp body from the kitchen table, smiled at her, and said, "Actually, I changed my mind. Why don't we get married again and have children, and you stay in the city?" Her expression changed from sadness to joy, and then to anger as I looked into her eyes. Then she started hitting me in the chest with her fists, shouting, "You damn asshole, ruthless! How could you do this to me? I hate you, son of a bitch." After she had been pounding me for half a minute or so, I threw her over my shoulder, carried her back to the bed, tore off her robe, pushed her face first onto the mattress, and made love until she was senseless. A month later, we got married again. The day we did this, she threw away the remaining birth control pills. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.